Loving a narcissist is one of the most psychologically complex and emotionally destabilizing experiences a person can go through, yet it remains widely misunderstood by those who have never lived through it. From the outside, these relationships often appear functional, even ideal. The narcissistic partner may present as charismatic, confident, attentive, and socially admired. They often know how to create a compelling image, one that signals success, emotional intelligence, and desirability. This outward persona can make the relationship seem enviable to others, reinforcing the illusion that everything is healthy and fulfilling. However, beneath this carefully curated surface lies a deeply imbalanced and psychologically draining dynamic that slowly erodes the emotional stability, self-worth, and cognitive clarity of the person who loves them. What makes loving a narcissist uniquely disorienting is not just the presence of mistreatment, but the persistent ambiguity surrounding it. Unlike overtly abusive relationships where harm is clear and recognizable, narcissistic dynamics operate in a gray area where affection and harm are interwoven. One moment, the narcissist may appear loving, supportive, and deeply engaged, creating a sense of connection that feels genuine and meaningful. The next moment, that same person may become distant, critical, dismissive, or even hostile without any clear cause. This inconsistency creates a destabilizing emotional environment where the person on the receiving end is constantly trying to make sense of what is happening. This ongoing unpredictability is not accidental. It is structural. It is embedded within the relational pattern itself. The individual learns, often unconsciously, that stability is conditional and fleeting. As a result, they begin to monitor their own behavior closely, attempting to anticipate what might trigger the next shift in mood or attitude. They become hyper-aware of tone, wording, timing, and even subtle emotional cues, hoping to avoid conflict or withdrawal. Over time, this constant vigilance becomes exhausting, leading to chronic anxiety and a sense of walking on eggshells. A central mechanism that sustains this confusion is gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation that distorts a person's perception of reality. In narcissistic relationships, gaslighting is often subtle but persistent. The narcissist may deny statements they clearly made, reinterpret events in ways that shift blame, or accuse their partner of being overly sensitive, irrational, or unstable. Phrases like, "that never happened," "you're imagining things," or "you're overreacting," are not merely dismissive. They actively undermine the individual's confidence in their own perception. Over time, this repeated invalidation leads to a breakdown in self-trust. As this pattern continues, many individuals begin to internalize the narcissist's narrative, leading to a phenomenon often referred to as self-gaslighting. Instead of relying on their own emotional responses as valid indicators of their experience, they begin to question and minimize their own feelings. They may label themselves as too sensitive, too needy, or too emotional, even when their reactions are entirely appropriate, given the circumstances. This internal shift is not a sign of weakness, but a psychological adaptation aimed at maintaining coherence in an otherwise confusing environment. However, the long-term cost of this adaptation is significant. It creates a disconnect between the individual and their authentic emotional experience, fostering shame, self-doubt, and emotional suppression. Guilt plays a powerful and often underestimated role in maintaining the bond within a narcissistic relationship. It acts as a kind of psychological adhesive that keeps the individual engaged even when the relationship is clearly harmful. This guilt can manifest in multiple forms. There is guilt for expressing needs, guilt for setting boundaries, guilt for feeling unhappy, and even guilt for considering leaving. The narcissist often reinforces this guilt by deflecting responsibility and projecting blame. When problems arise, they are rarely framed as mutual issues. Instead, the responsibility is subtly shifted onto the other person, creating the impression that the relationship's dysfunction is their fault. This dynamic feeds into a deeply damaging belief: the idea that one is not enough. In a narcissistic relationship, there is often an implicit and ever-shifting standard that can never truly be met. The individual may invest immense effort into trying to please the narcissist, anticipating their needs, avoiding triggers, and striving to maintain harmony. They may sacrifice their own preferences, suppress their emotions, and take on additional responsibilities in the hope that doing so will stabilize the relationship. Yet despite these efforts, the sense of inadequacy persists. There is always something more that could have been done, something that was done incorrectly, or something that falls short. Importantly, this sense of inadequacy is not rooted in objective reality. It is a byproduct of the relational system itself. The narcissist's reactions are often driven by their own internal insecurities, need for control, and fluctuating emotional states rather than by anything the other person has done. This means that the rules of the relationship are inherently unstable. What is acceptable one day may be criticized the next. What is praised in one moment may be dismissed in another. This inconsistency reinforces the belief that the individual is somehow failing, even when there is no consistent standard to meet. Over time, this environment begins to feel less like a partnership and more like a system of control. Many individuals describe the experience as living under constant scrutiny, where every action and word is subject to evaluation. This creates a state of hypervigilance in which the individual is always scanning for potential signs of disapproval or conflict. This level of psychological tension is not sustainable. It drains emotional resources, reduces cognitive clarity, and limits the ability to engage authentically. Adding another layer of complexity is the narcissist's public persona. Outside the relationship, they may be perceived as kind, successful, generous, or even admirable. Friends, family, and colleagues may express positive opinions about them, sometimes even praising the relationship itself. This external validation creates a form of social dissonance. The individual may feel that their private experience does not align with the public perception, leading to further confusion. When others reinforce the narcissist's positive image, it can feel like a form of collective invalidation, making it even harder to trust one's own perspective. This discrepancy often leads to isolation. The individual may hesitate to share their experiences with others, fearing that they will not be believed or that their concerns will be dismissed. Even when they do attempt to explain what is happening, the subtle and complex nature of narcissistic dynamics can make it difficult to articulate. As a result, they may feel increasingly alone, navigating a deeply confusing experience without adequate support or validation. Another defining feature of loving a narcissist is the imbalance of emotional labor. In healthy relationships, emotional effort is typically reciprocal. Both individuals contribute to understanding, supporting, and responding to each other's needs. In narcissistic relationships, this balance is disrupted. One person becomes the primary emotional provider, the one who empathizes, adapts, problem solves, and maintains the relational connection. They invest significant energy into understanding the narcissist's behavior, often making excuses for it and extending compassion even when it is not reciprocated. In contrast, the narcissist often shows limited capacity or willingness to engage in the same level of emotional reciprocity. Their focus tends to remain on their own needs, perspectives, and experiences. This creates a one-directional flow of empathy, where one person gives and the other primarily receives. Over time, this imbalance becomes increasingly unsustainable, leading to emotional depletion and resentment. In the early stages of the relationship, this imbalance may not be immediately visible. Narcissists often engage in behaviors that create a strong sense of connection, such as intense attention, flattery, and expressions of deep understanding. This phase can feel exhilarating and validating, creating a powerful emotional bond. However, as the relationship progresses, these behaviors often diminish or become conditional. The initial intensity is replaced by criticism, withdrawal, or entitlement. The individual may find themselves longing for the earlier phase, believing that if they can just get it right, they can bring it back. This hope becomes another mechanism that sustains the relationship. It creates a cycle in which the individual continues to invest effort, driven by the belief that the relationship can return to its earlier state. However, this belief is often based on an illusion rather than a stable reality. The cumulative impact of these dynamics can be profound. Individuals who have loved a narcissist often report increased levels of anxiety, depression, and emotional numbness. They may struggle with decision-making, feel disconnected from their own identity, and experience a persistent sense of uncertainty. Their world may gradually narrow, becoming centered around the relationship and the effort required to maintain it. Even when physically separated from the narcissist, the psychological impact often persists. The internalized voice of criticism and doubt continues to influence thoughts and behavior. This can make it difficult to trust oneself, set boundaries, or engage confidently in new relationships. Leaving a narcissistic relationship is rarely straightforward. It involves more than just recognizing that the relationship is unhealthy. There are often deep emotional bonds, shared history, practical considerations, and ingrained psychological patterns that make separation complex. The individual may fear the consequences of leaving, including financial instability, social repercussions, or the loss of identity. They may also feel a sense of responsibility for the narcissist, believing that they need care, support, or understanding. Even after leaving, the process of recovery can be challenging. Healing involves not only creating distance from the narcissist, but also rebuilding a sense of self that has been compromised. This includes relearning how to trust one's own perceptions, validating one's experiences, and developing healthier relational patterns. It requires a gradual process of reconnecting with one's emotions, needs, and identity. Understanding what it truly feels like to love a narcissist requires moving beyond simplistic explanations and acknowledging the depth and complexity of the experience. It is not merely about being in a difficult relationship. It is about existing within a system that systematically undermines one's sense of reality, self-worth, and autonomy. It is about navigating a space where love and harm coexist, where clarity is elusive, and where emotional survival often requires significant adaptation. By bringing awareness to these dynamics, individuals can begin to make sense of their experiences. They can recognize that the confusion, self-doubt, and emotional exhaustion they have felt are not signs of personal failure, but natural responses to an inherently destabilizing environment. This understanding is a critical step toward reclaiming clarity, rebuilding self-trust, and ultimately moving toward healthier and more balanced relationships.